Welcome back to the Adventures of the Monad, which will look at life, the universe, and everything. My name is Kazim Kamal-ur-Rahim. In this series, I ask the question, where do we come from, who are we, and where are we going? I post one presentation a week. Please subscribe to my website and hit the bell icon for notification of future videos. You can also leave comments and join in forum discussions on my website. I ended the last presentation with a description of the lower heavens. These are the 4 molecular planes found in the mental world. Depending on the consciousness development of the monad, determines on which of these planes a soul alights on its journey back to sleep in its causal body. A major distinction between the levels is that on the lower two, 47.7 and 47.6, the monad dwells in a subjective environment, cut off from the rest of the mental world around it. It is not a bad place to be, but it is fictitious. It serves a purpose, however, as this is where the soul registers what it has learnt in its last incarnation. It also has the opportunity to practice skills developed that it may wish to incorporate into future incarnations. It is on the lowest 2 mental planes where young and community souls are to be found. Moving to the higher 2 molecular subplanes of the mental world, 47.5 and 47.4, objective perception of the mental world begins to develop. Cultured and compassionate souls still dwell in their thought bubbles, but they are now able to begin to engage more fully with the world around them. What exactly goes on in these 4 subplanes? We have come to understand that the mental world is there for a reason, and that the monad visits this world under a number of circumstances, not least important of which is when it permanently vacates its physical body at the end of an incarnation. So what goes on in this blissful environment? In heaven, people's interests and aspirations remain as they were on earth. Most people want to be happy, secure in a carefree environment, and be surrounded by loved ones. So it may come as no surprise to you, as this is an imagined environment, that this is exactly what they experience. It is, however, important to be cognizant of the fact that the loved ones you are conjuring up in your thought bubble are synthetic beings. There is a big difference to be noted about these beings compared to those found on the emotional plane. When the monad constructs a mental image of a particular person, this being is obviously made out of mental matter. The soul being imagined knows this is occurring and sends a piece of its causal matter to ensoul within the synthetic being. This enables this thought form to fully interact with the monad. On the emotional plane, all that image of the person imagined would do would be to reflect the thoughts and memories of its creator. So, why should another monad send its causal matter to populate your imaginary world? The reason is because the soul that is being imagined benefits from the additional opportunity to develop. On the emotional plane, the monad was trying to rid itself of negative traits and habits. On the mental plane, the monad has the opportunity to take the aspirations it has and develop them into abilities. People can practice at acquiring skills without getting tired. It can therefore be summarized that heaven is a place where experience gained by the monad is converted into wisdom. The events experienced and the knowledge acquired on the physical and emotional planes are reviewed and contemplated repeatedly. This activity can be reviewed sequentially, or activities can be grouped. All the lessons learnt are considered positive and are digested by the lower causal body. The negative experiences are not absorbed. Any negative traits and habits that are mentally derived are stored in the tertiary matter in the 47-4 molecule. Why the 47-4 molecule? Because this is a permanent molecule. It is stored in the causal body at the end of an incarnation cycle to await reactivation into a new mental envelope at the monad's next incarnation. So the traits and habits stored here make up part of the monad's subconscious in the next incarnation. Note that I mention the lower causal body. This is because this is the final envelope of incarnation. This envelope has no memory, as there is no permanent molecule or atom attached to it. However, it is the transferring agent of all the lessons learnt from each incarnation back to the higher causal body. Lessons that are not learnt during an incarnation can be assessed in the mental body and understood there. Those lessons that were learnt in the incarnation itself are better understood by going through a review process. But there is something that needs to be understood clearly and explains why repeated incarnations are vital for the further evolution of the monad. Anything that is learnt in the mental life review is not fully learnt until it is demonstrated in the physical world. This is where wisdom is gained. It is one thing to study something theoretically, it is another to practice it. We have already talked about time and how it operates at different speeds depending on what plane of matter you happen to be conscious on. On the mental plane, time passes faster as it is a 5-dimensional environment. This objectively compresses time. A blissful state of mind also compresses time, as you would have noticed when your holidays seem to fly past. Individuals with objective mental consciousness can review past, present, and probably future events in the emotional and physical worlds. The past is accessible because the Akashic record can be read on those planes. Words and sentences are not required in the mental world. It is possible to communicate with direct thought transfer, which is perceived and immediately understood by the recipient. No translation is required to understand the message, and no misunderstanding occurs. There is also no deception between the communicating parties. This allows for a vast amount of information to be transferred, including images, feelings, concepts, and impressions. We are the ones that determine the length of our stay in the mental world. It is our guardian angel that determines the length of our incarnation on the planet. The more productive time we have spent in our last incarnation on worthwhile endeavors, the more we have to process and understand. Therefore, we need longer to assimilate these lessons, resulting in a longer stay on the mental plane. It is possible for a highly developed soul to forego this reflective time in the mental world, to return to Earth quickly to aid the development of humanity. These instances are few and far between, and do require special dispensation from the hierarchy to undertake such actions. The usual next step is for the soul to process back to the higher causal envelope. This is discussed shortly. There is a universal statement, as above, so below. The mental world is a scaled-down representation of the cosmic mental world. Think of this greater world as the monad of our solar system. It is a vast storehouse of knowledge and wisdom, creating our planet, the solar system, and beyond. The Akashic records of the mental world are the only reliable source of information in history available to us. There is one catch though. We need objective mental consciousness to read it. Enlightened souls can read this treasure trove of knowledge just by focusing their consciousness. Compassionate souls can only access this information when they have ended their incarnations, are having an out-of-body experience, are sleeping, or are meditating deeply. So what is it like to read this record? You can quite literally see events unfolding before your mind's eye. More than this, you are conscious of the feelings and the thoughts of the actors in the scenes you are viewing. You even know their motives. The events you are viewing can be played faster or slower. This is useful if you are viewing geological events. The level of the viewer's consciousness determines how clearly they read the record, and their level of knowledge determines how much they understand it. It is all well and good seeing these events if you have the ability, but remember, they are occurring in 5 dimensions. So if you want to experience these events in a waking mind, they have to be transferred into a 3-dimensional concept to be understood. There is therefore bound to be a loss of information in this reduction process. This is why truth can never be fully manifest on the physical plane. The most recognizable inhabitants of the mental world are humans. We appear as bright, shining golden figures, surrounded by an oval aura of misty yellow light. We project as a recognizable figure of which 99% of our mental material is contained within our form, and only 1% protrudes to a distance of approximately 2 meters in diameter and 3 meters in height. The average mental body that is seen on this plane is surrounded by an opaque bubble of thought forms. This is the subjective bubble we live in until we evolve to a consciousness level where we see the mental world objectively. Just as with the emotional plane, when the monad moves on to the next transition in its journey, in this case back to the causal body, it leaves its mental shell behind. So, these carcasses are also visible on this plane. I mentioned that on the emotional plane, there is an area where you can find emotional envelopes of animals. Well, on the mental plane, on the lowest plane, 47.7, you can find the group souls of particular animal species. Revisit my presentation on group souls to better understand why animals have such souls. Secondary matter is the predominant matter on the mental plane, as it is on the emotional. This essence is molded consciously and unconsciously into thought forms known as elementals. Although they are synthetic creations, they are nevertheless inhabitants of this plane and clearly visible to those that have eyes to see. The masters of all planes of matter are the devas, and on the mental plane they apparently look very impressive. They appear as giant humanoid-like beings shining brightly as golden spheres of fire. They loom to a height of 100 meters and a diameter of 150 meters, so you are not going to pick a fight with them. These luminous beings guide various aspects of nature and much more besides. One class of devas, known as the Agnishvatas, oversee the construction of mental bodies. As with the emotional plane, there is a possibility that non-human visitors from other worlds may be present in the mental world of our planetary logos. They may even journey from further afield. They are invariably involved in important cosmic processes and are consequently not interested in us. You are much more likely to see a member of the 5th or 6th kingdom making an appearance on the mental plane rather than the emotional plane. These advanced monads really do set the place alight with their magnificent auras, streaming all manner of living colors. So what are they doing here? They are communicating with sleeping or meditating disciples on the mental plane. They also communicate with the enlightened monads on the causal plane. It should come as a relief to you that there are no black magicians to be found on the mental plane. They were there at one time, but were banished in a concerted effort by the hierarchy. It is a very interesting story in itself, but not for this presentation. These black magicians are highly intelligent with very well developed mental bodies. unfortunately for them, this body is heavily entangled with their emotional bodies, and this is what restricts them to the emotional plane. Unlike the emotional plane, which exists solely on the first triad, the mental plane is split between the first and second triads. Having said that, most of what has just been said about the mental world 47.4 to 47.7 applies to the causal world 47.1 to 47.3 as well. If the mental world is the world of concrete thought, the causal world is the world of ideas, intuition, light, sure knowledge, and the source of esoteric information that we are discussing in these presentations. In the mental world, we think using thought forms. These are conceptual perceptions of reality. In the causal world, the consciousness of the monad experiences reality directly. Direct perception means that mental error and emotional illusions are impossible. It is difficult to describe the causal mental world when no one is creating a consensus environment. Consequently, there is no objective scenery to behold. The causal world outshines the mental world in all ways. You experience more bliss, pleasure, serenity, light, and the colors are just more vibrant. The major difference of these two worlds can be perceived from the first triad, where the matter aspect predominates. The causal world can only be experienced from the second triad. Remember, this triad contains not only the causal world, but the unity plane and the lower spiritual plane where consciousness predominates. The causal world is called the formless world, but there is form here. Our souls have a form, but this form does not appear to be held in a physical envelope. It appears to dissolve into colors and light. Having said that, light is an aspect of matter. So fear not, the Trinity is still ever present. The higher causal body. I use this term because remember that the persona is the lower causal body that surrounds the three envelopes of incarnation. This higher body of a young soul is a transparent and iridescent ball of light looking like a soap bubble. In size, it is approximately 7 meters in diameter. This envelope fills up with causal matter, and to look at it, you would see a ball of glistening, shining and pulsating light. When a monad evolves to the community and cultured phases of its development, the sheath appears to be a delicate sphere of living fire. By the compassionate and enlightened stages of development, the sphere has grown to about 10 meters in diameter and is even more luminous, shining like the sun. When the monad leaves the fourth kingdom and enters the fifth kingdom, this luminous, fiery sphere differentiates into concentric rings of color, which have a brilliant white light radiating from its center. Impressive stuff. The causal world has its own collective memory, and this is the highest and most reliable source of information associated with our planet. As we know, higher levels of consciousness incorporate all the lower levels of consciousness as well. For this reason, the causal world has information of everything that has happened in the lower worlds. Memories of the lower world are chaotic and fragmented, as they are saturated with trivial, fictitious, and illusory thoughts. Once you get to the causal world, information is systematically organized, and it is always found in the correct context. It is interesting to note that information stored at the causal level is organized by the causal consciousness of every enlightened person passing through these subplanes. For this reason, the memory bank is continually being updated. The causal world also contains selected information and ideas from the fifth kingdom. So, how does this memory bank work? Remember, a causal idea is not presented in a linear manner. It is a geometric shape, and within this is somehow enclosed all the information you seek. If you happen to be enlightened and can access this information, causal ideas, shapes, are presented on demand to an individual seeking them. They enter their consciousness. All the monad has to do is select what it wants to know. A soul with this faculty can quote from any book ever written. They would not only know the thoughts contained in the book, but the thoughts of the author as they wrote the book. They can also know the source of all the reference material, and if they were really feeling masochistic, the thoughts in the minds of the authors of all those references as well. This is how H.P. Blavatsky wrote The Secret Doctrine. She had not seen, let alone read, all the thousands of quotes presented in the book. Yet she clearly knew of the existence of each and every one of those quotes. I'm going to leave it there for the moment and continue my exploration of the causal world in my next presentation. If you wish to read a transcript of the presentation or leave a comment, links to my website are in the description box below. Thank you.